Hello, humane marketers. Sarah Znakrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hey, Meg, good to speak to you.
It's so good to be here with you. Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Thanks. We just recorded another episode where I was the guest on your podcast, and now you're here. I just love doing those. It's when you really get a feel for the human, it's not like, oh, we're just pitching each other for being a podcast guest and then we never speak again. This really feels like, yeah, we get to know each other a little bit. So,
and I think when you find somebody that you resonate with, the reciprocity comes naturally versus more of a, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, doesn't feel good. But hey, we have different things to say to different audiences, but there's a lot of alignment in there. So let's talk to both of these different groups. It feels really good,
Exactly. It's not just like, oh, because you pay me, now I pay you back. Yeah, that's true.
Collaboration versus reciprocity, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So your business is called Love at First Search. And I just want you to start there and explain what that means. Well, I kind of gave it away in the intro, but still tell us, how you came up with that. And just, the word love already gives it away, right? So give us more info on that.
Sure. So Love at First Search is a search engine optimization firm where we're helping small businesses mostly to be found on search engines like Google or Bing, but also YouTube is a search engine, and any podcast, wherever you're listening to this podcast, that's also a search engine. So we're talking a lot to content creators about how to bring in people who want to hear your message, how to create content that makes them feel seen and valued and appreciated and understood. A lot of search engine marketing is like a numbers game. It is, what is the keyword that has the right amount of search volume, and also it has the low keyword difficulty and not too competitive in terms of our AdWords numbers. Like, there's a lot of metrics around it. And I've had several clients come to me and say, I tried search before, and my consultants all tried to push me in a direction that didn't feel good. Mm-hmm. And so what we are trying to do at Love at First Search is show up in the search results that feel like we understand what our clients need from us, not just what is the most obvious opportunity. We want it to feel relevant to what people need versus just kind of a spray and pray approach to marketing.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a more human and humane way of explaining just the word SEO alone, right? If you hear that, and I know that there's a lot of people who have never heard of SEO, right? They have their websites, they're coaches or healers or consultants even. And so whenever we use an abbreviation that assumes that they are supposed to know what it means, but they don't, and then they feel really embarrassed and they're like, oh, should I be doing that? What's that? Right? And so the way you explain it makes so much more sense also for people who are in humane business, because it's not just it's not just the keywords. It is about this idea of resonating with ideal clients, right? So
Yeah.
I love that.
And I think a lot of times when people think about search engine optimization, about SEO as a marketing tactic, they see it as a mass marketing tactic of how many people can I get in front of. But as we know from the ways that kind of the pendulum is swinging in the digital marketing world, it's not necessarily about quantity anymore. If you're running, I mean, it is for some specific types of businesses. If you're running sort of more of a blog or content platform type of business where the number of podcast downloads that you get impacts your sponsorship packages, and the number of page views that you get impacts your, cost per visit, like there is a place for those kinds of businesses where you can be a free resource because you have these backup monetization options. But for so many of us, that's not how we're getting paid. We're getting paid because we are service providers, or we sell very specific products to a small group of dedicated people.
Yeah.
And often the solutions that we're helping our audience with are not mass market solutions. We're not Nike trying to sell shoes to everybody. We're like, I want to sell, shoe insoles to joggers who have plantar fasciitis, right? Like we get really targeted down and we solve problems that people have. So why not, when those people are having those problems, why not be the ones that show up and help those people in your audience to feel like they're understood?
Yeah, that is such a good point that you mentioned people are humans, right? Because what we usually hear is traffic or generating traffic. But when you think about traffic, you either see like, a huge traffic jam on a highway, and what you see there is cars, you don't see humans. Or on the internet, you think of traffic. I don't see humans when I think of internet traffic. I just see like empty nothing, it's like maybe wires or something like that.
And so much of the noun choices, the word choices that are used in the mass marketing approach, and you've said like hype marketing or bro marketing, like the phrases and choices that we make are traffic and users and page views and visitors. It's very leads, right? Like they're prospects. Especially when we get into like really metrics based, where it's like, these are the marketing qualified leads and these are the sale qualified leads, and they're not even people anymore. They're just SQLs, right? Like, and there is a place for trying to figure out where your marketing resonates and where people may or may not fit for your messaging, right? But when we start to zoom out that far, we lose sight of, sure, you have 100,000 users on your website. Every single one of those is a human sitting at a computer scrolling through your words.
Exactly. Yeah. So you talk about using empathy in keywords. And so that already is kind of like, feels like an oxymoron. It's like, right? What? Empathy, keywords, how does that go together? I'm seeing like spreadsheets with empathy, and I'm like, how does that work? So tell us how that works.
I think the core of how we need to do marketing better is not just, look at the spreadsheet and figure out the easiest solution, but truly understanding why our businesses exist, what they do for our audience, and like how we can really start to have that connection with them. And a lot of times, I don't know exactly how to explain this. Let me, a lot of times when people are having some sort of problem or issue, they don't necessarily want to ask their friends for help. They don't want to go on Facebook. If you're a health coach and you're helping clients who have Crohn's disease, then they have a lot of symptoms that are not things that you want your friends to know about. We'll just leave that as like a nice, clean answer there. But when people have those kinds of problems, they go to search engines and they go like, I'm having a constant stomach ache, right? That's the nicest, cleanest way to say it. there's a lot of poop keywords out there. So I'll try not to get too heavy in that. But you know, they don't want people to know, but Google feels like a safe place to get slightly unbiased answers to questions that you don't want to go on Facebook and say to people like, I'm struggling in my marriage and I'm thinking about getting a divorce, or my child is struggling with this. And like, there's a lot of pride that people have, and they want to present themselves to their friends, to their networks as having it all together. But when it comes to search, that's a safe place to ask the questions that you don't feel safe asking in other places.
Yeah, it reminds me of an exercise we do in the Marketing Like We're Human program, where we look at the empathy map.
Yes.
You've seen this, right? Where you think about your ideal client and you think of what they say, think, feel, and do. I don't know if I got the order correctly, but yeah, it's exactly that. It's like, what are they thinking, or what are they Googling would be a good way also to say it, right? What are they Googling, but they're never going to say that in a first session with you, right? It's like, it's the embarrassing things that if you then, and I guess what you're saying is where the empathy shows up, is if you then write a post that addresses that issue with empathy, not with shaming, of course, then they feel heard and seen, because they just found the solution and they found the human who offers that solution.
Yeah, sometimes it's not even like the post absolutely can be empathetic, and that will help with the conversion. But just seeing the name of the post show up in those search results can sometimes be a validation of the experience. You know, I was talking yesterday with a play therapist in Virginia, and some of her keywords will be very obvious, like play therapy, Virginia, right? Like her specific town. She works specifically with adoptive families. So it's like play therapy for adopted children. So sometimes the keywords can be very clear, but we also tried to get to the empathy of it. What are the problems that these children are exhibiting that they're getting the calls from school saying your child seems to have anxiety, or the preschooler is biting? What are those things that the parent doesn't know where to go? The parent doesn't know what to do next, or they're like, oh, my kid's about to get kicked out of preschool because they're hitting and biting. What can I do to help them? Right? Like, when people have problems, they go seeking solutions. And if you can be that port in the storm, that safe place to say, I know yeah, my kid bit too. I know how to help them work through that. I know how to help you as a parent work through it with them. You're not alone, because just by the fact that this is showing up in those search results, it proves that I've been there and I can help you with it. There's a certain amount of connection that happens in just having your experience acknowledged.
Yeah. Yeah. From there, you then, so now we're kind of learning, okay, to do keyword research, but coming from this place of empathy, right? So all of a sudden, it doesn't just feel like this left brain analytical activity, because we're bringing in the right brain and actually thinking, well, what would they be searching for? How can I really show empathy and help them with their problem? So we're doing the research, the keyword research. What's the next step? So, or maybe already still, like you talked quickly before, volume and difficulty of competition and all that. Tell us what we need to look for in these keywords.
Well, so let's define keyword research before we leap too much into sort of the strategy behind it. So when keyword research is another one of those phrases that can feel overwhelming, because people go, oh, that's a lot of spreadsheets. Keyword research is figuring out what people are typing into Google. That's it. And those phrases that you sit down and you type in, or, you know, most of us are doing it from our phones now. Sometimes us are speaking into Siri for it, right? But whatever you are asking Google is your keyword. So it doesn't have to be one word. It can be a phrase, it can be a question, it can be a statement. Anything that you can search is a keyword. Now, the next step, like you said, is to figure out, for not necessarily every page on your website, but every page on your website can be found for different keywords. So it's not that you have to be found for, humane business coach, and that is the only phrase, and you have to put it on every page of your website so that people who are looking for that can find that one phrase, and you have to put all your eggs in that basket. This is not the Lord of the Rings. There is no one keyword to rule them all. This is and one of the reasons I love SEO, and I feel like I can talk about this with you, is it's an abundance mindset.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a scarcity thing where I have to be found for SEO consultant or nobody will ever find me. This is, what are all the different on-ramps to this highway that different people need at different points, but the destination is the same.
Right. Yeah.
So you can be found for that one phrase of humane businesses or gentle marketing. You can have those sort of branded search terms where you have spent time to build a brand around the titles of your books and the titles of your business and your community name. Those are branded search. But we also have search terms that are just what do people need from us?
Mm-hmm.
What questions do they ask? And each of those concepts, I call them keyword clusters, but each of those search intents can go to a different page of your website. It doesn't all have to filter in through your homepage. Your copy doesn't have to convert all from right there. You have the opportunity to create infinite number of entry points. So every podcast episode that you record can be found for 100 different search terms. How cool is that?
It's very cool. It's very cool if you know how to do that keyword research, because I think also maybe what you need to explain is this idea of the volume and the difficulty of actually ranking, because 15 years ago when I started out, it was relatively okay. You could rank highly, I'm not going to say easily, but it was definitely much easier than today. Today we have so much content out there. You do have to have a certain knowledge about, what do people search? How much do they search for that? And then also how much content does already exist that is optimized, I think you would say, for that keyword, right?
Yeah, you just nailed the three big things: is what do people search for, how many people search for it, and how many other people have written about it. And that's where some of those search metrics come into place, is figuring out not just what are people saying, but if I were to target this idea, could I actually show up for it?
Right.
And so sometimes people aim too high and they go, I'm going to try to be found for online business, without that recognition of, but why? Why that phrase? Oh, because I'm an online business coach. Okay, cool. But what do you help people with? What do you do differently? What about your approach is different? We have a student right now in one of our programs she calls herself a conscious business coach for change makers, which is not a phrase that anybody would know to look for. But she does really well in a post that she has about why she doesn't do discovery calls and how you can run a more streamlined and better feeling business if you have an alternative to discovery calls. And the phrase that shows up is alternative to discovery calls.
Wow, go figure. Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't have to be, hundreds of thousands of people searching for a keyword, but those people who are going to Google after doing another discovery call that tanked, and they're going, oh, how do I stop doing discovery calls? And they find her website.
But here's the question. How did she come up? How did she think of using that as a keyword? Or was that just a fluke and then she noticed and...
Sometimes it's a fluke, right? Sometimes you stumble into a phrase and you can use the metrics to figure out what that is. I'd be happy to teach people how to go into their Google Search Console and go, there are ways to know exactly what every single phrase is that people find you for. But sometimes, in her case in particular, for Caroline, it was I just know that people would come into that and then go to my contact form and then say, I found you through this blog post. It doesn't always have to
Nice.
be this
Yeah.
like automated user flow. What's the conversion rate from each landing page? It's important information,
Yeah.
but sometimes you can get the same information from a conversation.
Yeah. So nice.
And then if you're
Okay.
trying to figure out what to create next that might attract those ideal clients, like listen to your ideal clients.
Yeah.
What else don't they like about what's happening in the online, in her case, in the online, or your case too, probably. Like what are those things that they don't like? Okay, create a blog post or podcast episodes about your unique approach to it.
Right. Yeah.
And your content can come either from, you know, being keyword driven, which is making sure that you know that exact phrase that people are looking for, and then putting it when you're publishing the document for the first time, you can say, okay, I'll put this in my SEO title and my blog post title and my subheadings and my alt text. Like there's a way to do it that way. But I find that for a lot more of my kind of heart-centered marketers that I work with, it can be easier to create something, think about what would people search if they needed this, include some of that thought process into the post, and then hit publish and wait and see what happens.
Okay.
It doesn't always have to be driven from the keywords. It can be what resonates, and then how can I optimize what's already working.
Right. Yeah. So flipping it on its head and instead of starting with the strategy, starting with the empathy, because you're writing content that your ideal clients will resonate with, and then seeing, okay, this works, this one doesn't. Let me take the one that works and make it even better and more optimized for the search engine.
Exactly. And it can also, if that approach resonates with you, then it can also feel a lot more connected to the needs of your clients and take away some of that perfectionism.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's absolutely a feeling when you have some sort of like, I'm going to spend so much time writing these blog posts and I want to make sure that they show up in search results right away. And if I don't get it right, then what's the point?
Right.
But if we're creating for our audience first and then optimizing for search second, then you know what, this is everything about marketing is the 80-20 rule, right? The Pareto principle that 20% of your work creates 80% of your results. So if you publish things and you also send them out to your newsletter and you share them wherever your audience is, and 20% of them bring in search traffic, then maybe that's actually very normal. But then when people land on the pages that are working for search, then you can link to them to the other ones that are still valuable, that are still important, that are still part of your unique approach to things. And once people arrive on your website, then they can go explore that information. We don't need to be found for every search result. We need to be introduced and then let your website tell your story.
Basically what you're saying is you don't need every page or every blog post to bring you all this traffic, because if you just have one or two or three or obviously the more the better, but if you just have a few that really work, and they can really work, like
they can really
some
work.
of them is like, oh my god, all of a sudden you're like getting tons and tons of new signups to your freebie or whatever. So yeah, that's enough, right? And then like you said, you just link it to your other blog posts so that people can still discover more content. I guess that also leads us to this idea of Cornerstone pages, because that's another thing you mentioned when we exchanged by email. So yeah, was what you described already maybe an example of a Cornerstone page where you link to other
not quite. There is something relevant there. So what we were talking about earlier was some of these metrics around, there are certain amounts of keywords that a lot of people are looking for, but other people have talked about, so it can be harder to rank for those terms. Right. It can be really helpful if you're in that boat to create a longer piece of content that shares everything that you've created on a topic. So You might create a piece of Cornerstone content called The Humane Approach to Online Business Marketing. You can almost think of these as like ultimate guides, everything you need to know about this topic, humane marketing 101, whatever we want to call that post,
Right.
where you've talked about humane marketing on every page of your website.
Right.
Every single one. Well, maybe this is not maybe the right phrase for you because it is your domain name, so it will go to your homepage. Well, we can talk about that. I'm spitballing here a little bit. But let's think about that core value that you have, or that core idea, that category that you're talking about. There can be a point where you can create an outline of what are the framework, what are the principles that I'm talking about all the time, and what have I already created that supports this. And then you can create one ultimate guide that covers all of that. And if we're talking about a phrase like humane marketing, gentle marketing, ethical marketing, that's sprinkled throughout your website, Google doesn't always know like what is the right page to share that information. But if you have a guide on your website that's longer, that links to all those other things, and that all those other places around the website where you've talked about that, it links back to that guide, that cornerstone content, sometimes it's called silo content, then that is a clear indicator to Google that that is the place on your website for that term. And you can rank for terms that a lot of other people have talked about. If they haven't gone into the level of detail that you have in that guide, then you can like jump up ahead of them in those search results because you've created something that is better quality, that positions you as an authority on that topic, and that proves to Google that you know what you're talking about. And so that's what we're talking about with Cornerstone content. And I often talk to podcasters who are like, I have 100 episodes talking about this particular topic. And I'm like, okay, create, an overview guide. Basically take a piece of thread and tie a narrative through the most important things that you're talking about. For my podcast, we created a Cornerstone guide called Mental Health, Entrepreneurship, and Social Media, because nobody's talking about those three pieces together.
Right. Yeah. I love that. And so did you research whether there is search volume for mental health and social media?
Yeah. So it was conversations that I was having on the podcast already with therapists and social workers. And, I was having those conversations already. The content was already created. And I knew that it was a topic that we wanted to discuss more. And I was starting to see some of these keywords show up in our metrics around mental health and entrepreneurship, or around social media anxiety was a phrase that we targeted for that particular page. And so we wrote a longer post that was just like, here are the entrepreneurs that we've interviewed who talked about anxiety. Here are the ones that, and here are the mental health professionals that we've interviewed. And we took pull quotes from their episodes and then linked to those episodes. So if people are looking for that, it's basically like almost like a playlist of what's already been created. But instead of just a list of here are the things that we've created in this category, we're telling a story in that post.
So here's what I just finished, is a hugely long post about humane marketing words we love.
Ooh.
And so it goes through all these words like abundance and intuition, integrity and conscious, like all of these words that I use all over the book. And then I linked, to podcasts or blog posts, or so would that be an example of a Cornerstone page?
Totally.
Even though there's probably no search volume for humane marketing words yet, right?
So yes and no. So the thing about Cornerstone content is that it is a guide in one place. And in your case, it's almost like a thought leadership piece of Cornerstone content, so that when more people become aware of these terms, they can then, like, Google will already know that it exists. You're ahead of the curve, hopefully. But the great thing about it is that now it exists. And sure, Google can find it and they can send you traffic for it, but it's still an incredibly powerful asset in your business.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking of using it like in the menu bar, like as a start here or something like that.
I would say a start here button. I could see you calling it almost like a term glossary, like a humane marketing term glossary. Like what is its use that people might need from it? They might go, oh, what are all these terms? Like, how would you define these things?
Right.
So you could include it on your homepage and say, come check out our humane marketing glossary to give people that idea of what is that resource for them.
Right. Yeah.
But then also every page on your website that is linked from that glossary, you can then link back to it. So if somebody listens to your episode about abundance and then goes to the show notes and then checks out the glossary and then goes and listens to the one about consciousness, right? Like it can be a piece of, sometimes they'll call it hub content.
Right.
That it doesn't have to just be there for Google. It can be a really great navigation tool. And maybe you want to turn it into a downloadable PDF that people can have as a guide.
Right. Yeah, that would be another option. Exactly. I saw that's what you have because it's so long, right? It's like, well, you want a PDF of that?
Yeah. When people we have a Cornerstone guide on the Love at First Search website. No, I was talking about the podcast Cornerstone a minute ago, but we have one on our Love at First Search site that is just like, here's our 15-step approach to creating a really search-friendly website. And the post itself is 7,500 words. It is a short novel. It's a novel.
It is a novel.
It's a blog post novella. You don't have to write that much. This is what I do, right? Like this is what we do best. Yours does not. Absolutely. It can be 1,500 words and still be considered Cornerstone content. So don't feel like that's the norm. This was a labor of love that we put together last year. It took me 50 hours to create. That's not normal, right? But knowing that it is a 7,500 word blog post, our calls to action on the Cornerstone guide for the first third of it, for the first like 2,000 words is like, yeah, this is really long. Do you just want me to email this to you? Do you want me to just, so we send it as a PDF and then we send follow-up emails that, we turned it into an automated funnel to break it down and make it feel more reasonable to consume, where we break it into a 3-act process and then provide those like resources in those documents, and each one has a video. And so we created it into more of an opt-in guide, but that's not everyone has to go to that level of extreme, but our opt-ins are insane on it. It's like we get a 7% opt-in rate when people land on that guide because it has value. It doesn't always get search traffic because there's so much around the internet about web design, but when people land on that page, they join my email list, they join my programs, like it converts very well for us. And it tries to meet people at every stage of that process and let them choose where they are in that process and not feel like you have to start from step one. So there's a lot of, when you're creating a guide based on your approach or your framework, it can be hard to figure out how to organize it. But what you just said about having a glossary, like that's a way of proving that you are using these terms and sharing where they fit on your website and allowing people to go exploring in a way that feels good.
Yeah, no, I really like this idea of first helping your clients, but then also hopefully helping helping the search engines, right? Understanding more, learning about your unique approach. So yeah, that really feels good. Can you have more than one Cornerstone content, or is that just like you have to have one piece and that's it?
No, anytime that you have sort of a core idea, you can create Cornerstone content around it. Some people, and again, this comes back to like, do you start from the keywords or do you start from the content? The chicken or the egg of all of it. Some people who have been creating for a long time, they could go through, audit their content, maybe just kind of note like what are the themes that continue to show up,
and
come up with an idea for a Cornerstone guide. And then those people who already have all that content might then create an outline and say, based on what's here, I can see the gaps. I can go create more content. I can build this up. And then there are going to be the folks who are like, I already know that I want to talk about, mental health and social media. So here are the topics that I want to talk about. And I'm going to go create each of those podcast episodes. I'm going to go seek out the guests that I need. I'm going to create the guide in order. There's no right or wrong way to create these. It's just more of take the building blocks and build a wall.
Yeah. What I like most about talking with you just now is that you hand out these permission slips as well. It's like, no, you don't have to start with the keyword research. Because before we started talking, I went on to Neil Patel again and saw all his videos, and I'm like, I can't go back there. Like, it's
so prescriptive. It's
so prescriptive, and it's just like all this, kind of masculine energy and spreadsheets, and I'm like, it's just not for me. But to hear you say, well, you can start it with the content and then start to optimize it, that feels really, really good. So thanks for handing us that permission slip.
It's so clear that I'm neurodivergent, right? Like that there are all these rules, and as an industry, it's very much a like linear approach to the way of doing things. And my brain is just not linear, and I don't want it to be linear. And there are a lot of rules out there that are like, here, do this checklist, follow this plan, get these results, improve on the results. And I sit down to do the plan and I'm like, but I don't want to.
No, it's like, I'm a rebel. I don't want to follow your silly rules.
And like, where is the space in that for inspiration? Where is the space in that for intuition?
Yeah.
Sometimes the best content that you create is not the stuff that's in the plan. It's the stuff that you stumble into because you're following your gut.
Yeah. And we talked earlier on your show about, ChatGPT and AI and all of that. Imagine now with how easy it is to just tell ChatGPT, write me a blog post, 6 steps for blah, blah, blah. And we're going to be bombarded with all this like inhumane, boring content that just feels like, the same guy wrote it. And so imagine now you showing up with your content that starts from within, that starts from the heart. And sure, once you posted it, you're going to pay attention to some keywords, but it doesn't start with that. How different is that going to feel, right, to the reader? It's completely different. It really is. Yeah.
And that's what can set you apart, right?
Yeah.
That's where all of this empathy comes into play is you can sound like everyone else, but the thing that's going to set you apart the thing that's going to make your quality matter more than someone else's quantity is your humanity.
Right. Yeah. That's a nice line, I think, to end.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, this has been really joyful and fun. Thanks so much for hanging out. Please do tell people where they can get that really, really long PDF that they need to download.
You don't have to go download it. You can just go browse around. You don't have to. That's the other thing about me. I'm like, you don't have to do anything. I'm very like rebellious in nature. If you would like to find out more, you can head over to loveatfirstsearch.com. We have an SEO starter kit right there that can help you start to get your head wrapping around this idea of keyword research. You can check out our SEO website guide, which is that long form guide of, pop in wherever you are in the framework and figure out where it makes sense to optimize your website. Whether you're creating it from scratch or it's been up for years, there are steps in there that make sense based on where you are progressively. We also do have a podcast, and you can come listen to Sarah on the podcast because we just recorded that. That is called the Social Slowdown Podcast. So you can find that on whatever podcast device you're listening to or socialslowdown.com.
Wonderful. I always have one last question, and that is, what are you grateful for today or this week?
I mean, today you and I had to push things around because my elder son has been struggling in school. And so the school actually brought in a clinically trained psychologist to observe him in class and help us come up with ways to support him both in the classroom and at home. And that's a really powerful thing to, now I'm getting a little choked up, but that feeling of having somebody that you care about be seen and supported. And for me, that's a huge amount of gratitude of being supported as a parent and knowing that my kid's getting what he needs.
Yeah, what a wonderful service that
Yeah.
school is offering. That's great.
Yeah, and it turns out it's occupational therapy. It's sensory inputs. So I'm like, okay, I guess we'll be doing more army crawls in the morning before you go to school. That's the answer to all of it.
Thanks so much for sharing. Thanks for being here, Meg. And yeah, we'll talk again. I hope.
All right, talk to you soon, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.